Hello everybody, welcome to the second course. You probably have come from the first course where we dived into all the actual detailed information stuffs about flight planning. In this course, we're going to be looking at the practical matters of flight planning. So in other words, the first course showed you what to do and where to find the information. This course is going to show you how to do it and where we put the information, what we use the information for, how we use it, how we structure it, how we use the information that we get from the first course and put it into something important in the second course, and that is a field operations manual. You can also call it a field operations guide. Some people call it that. I've got just one document. It's an Excel spreadsheet, but it has 10 sheets. It's got 10 sheets in it. So each sheet serves its own assessment, checklist, or document purpose, whatever it is. We will go through all of them. I'll open it up now just to have your introduction for the course and what we're going to be looking at. Each of those sheets is going to serve its own assessment. The first sheet is your actual FOM guideline. So that's what, if we were just looking at general terms, that would be your FOM. A properly structured or a well-planned FOM would be that, plus all these assessments next to it. What I've done is I've made the FOM that one guideline, so you don't have to print everything. You can just print that one. The other ones, the 9 other ones, are going to serve the purpose of helping you get the information you need for that first one. So I'm going to open it up now on my screen, and we're going to go through it just so that you can have a general understanding of what to expect. And then as the course goes on, we'll go through each sheet one by one. I'm going to start with sheet 1, which is the FOG. I'm then going to go all the way up to sheet 10. And then we're going to finish off with coming back to a course conclusion, which would be back to sheet 1, the FOM guideline sheet, and going through that again in conclusion of why we did all these other assessments. That being said, let's go ahead and open this thing up. So here we are in the Excel spreadsheet that I was talking about, the Excel document. You'll see, if my mouse will come onto the screen, you'll see at the bottom here that we've got our 10 different things. You can't see it right now, but if I go over, you'll see the 10th one come up. But let's go through them all. All right, so we start with your field operations manual. And first and foremost, I just want to point out how good they all look. I mean, check all of these out. And that's why, right, we do have a calculation, a flyaway calculation, that changes using Excel calculations, so you don't have to worry about that. So we start with the field operations manual checklist. This is basically your quick reference guide, all right? That's what some ROC companies would call it. Drone companies will use a quick reference guide once they've done a plan out, which will have all the most important information on it that will be handed out to crew members at the site. All of this is all encompassing of one FOM. But this is your quick reference guide. This is literally a quick reference guide. It is a summary of everything we go into, but it is more than a summary. This is basically taking the information that we get in all those other all these other ones here, the flight details, all the other assessments, the checks and stuff, and putting it into here with maybe a little bit more detail than what we need. Depending what you're flying, if you're flying recreational, you're not even going to fill half of this out. But if you're flying for a certain purpose, you might fill most of this out, and if you're flying for a very specific purpose, you will definitely fill all of this out. It's very dependent on what you need. I've made this so that no matter what sort of flight you are planning, you'll be able to follow this and use this document to help you plan that flight, so you don't have to worry about if anything was missed or anything like that. Okay, so if we go into the flight details, this is your 5 W's and an H. You've then got your system details checklist. I have filled some stuff in just so that for my mind, as I was structuring it, I was making sure I wasn't missing anything. So I did fill things in, but you don't need to worry about that now. I'm going to remove them out, and then we're going to look at me putting the information in. I've then gone to your flight details checklist. So your flight requirement checklist is, why are we flying? It's answering all these questions. Your system details is then, are we using the right drone for the mission? And then your flight details checklist is checking, okay, now what is the actual flight going to entail? If we move on to your site assessments, we start with the pre-site assessment observations. We do this first. We do it in about your location information, the ground information, air information, and emergency response information. You then move to the on-site assessment, which we'll talk about now. It's based, we'll talk about it when we get there, when we go into it'll be the third recording. Your on-site assessment is checking how accurate your pre-site checks were, and it's doing just a little bit more stuff as well. Then we move on to your crew briefing form. This is how you're going to manage your crew. You can see that I do have some things filled in. The idea here is that you're going to highlight things that you need to know. Moving on to your weather assessment, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's just talking about all the weather you can research and what you can see when you're on site. Pre-flight checklist, this is I want to make it go side to side. There you go. Okay, no, that was just zoomed in and out, or whatever. It works. So this is your checking your equipment checklist. So I have a before and I have an after table. The before table is things like your pre-flight checks and stuff, but your before table is before you depart for where you're going. You need to check, do you have all of this stuff? Then once you're packing up after your flight, you do this one here. It's the same thing really, okay? Then your pre-flight and post-flight for a multi-rotor. I've also got for an aeroplane, and I've even got for a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing. Then you go to your flyaway preparation sheet. This is your flyaway chart, okay? So you can use this to figure out all the numbers and stuff. You don't have to worry about actually doing that calculation that we learned in the first course, which is a huge bonus in this. You've got this here, so you just input on these red ones here, you just input your own numbers that you work out. So for example, your maximum drone speed, and then things will change. If I put this at 17, you'll see how all the other things change. Then you've got your flyaway area of effect. This is then once you've established on a map where your flyaway boundaries are, you put these things in. You then use these here as well. So this is just going to help you figure out what you need to do. Okay, so your drone speed, wind speed, drone endurance, so on and so forth. Then you move on to your risk assessment. The risk assessment, I've made out the matrices or matrices, whatever the word would be. Maybe I should Google it. I've made them out on your Excel, so you can see this is the actual assessment. These are the two things that you use to do the assessment. We learned about it in the first course. This is your assessment checklist. So these are just briefly the things that you might want to check out the most when you're identifying risk. And then you take them here and you put them in. Obviously, if you need to, you can just add more in this table. I've only done 10, and I've done that for the emergency response plan as well, is just 10, because 10 is a nice round number. I didn't want to sit here doing 25, because you could do 25 realistically, but 10 is fine to get the purpose across. Then we move on to the second last one, is your emergency response plan, or ERP. This is literally what are you going to do in these instances. Okay, these are just some of my own possibilities for where I was going to be flying. Normally these would be empty, but you'll see again that I've done 10 here. The second sheet here is your emergency contact information and your emergency preparation checklist. Do you have all of these things? Where are they located? So on and so forth. Finally, you go to your radio call SOP. This wasn't completely necessary, but it does just make things a lot easier. Okay, this is where you're going to put in the information that you want to include into your radio call. And at the bottom here, you can then type your radio call out. So you then type your radio call out, and this allows you to have a written down radio call for you, so you don't have to try and memorize the radio call every time. You've also got one for your end radio call and your radio call procedures at the end. And this is just your radio call details, so your frequencies and nearby aerodromes, things like that. And then a little checklist at the bottom. And that is that. That is all of the documents that we're going to use for this. We're then going to dive into the second video now, which is going to be looking at this in our detail and how I'm going to start the course, how I'm going to start planning everything. And if you haven't purchased the course yet, please go ahead and do so. It's gonna help you a lot, and you're gonna get this document along with it, which is going to be super beneficial. I would have purchased the course just for this alone, but that's me. Of course, you might be different, but I'd recommend it anyways.